Good evening, everybody. It's Dr. Michael Patmos. It is June 1st, 2026, and I have, I think, an important video for you tonight. And if you read, it's pretty lengthy video, pretty lengthy text below in the article, but I would really encourage you to read it carefully and make note of the fact that it's very highly referenced with top tier published evidence from the most prestigious, most rigorous medical journals in the world. So the information that's in this video and in the text below is you can take it to the bank. It is the best quality evidence we have. And so what am I talking about tonight? Well, I posted, well, let me back up. There was a post on LinkedIn quoting Aaron Rodgers saying that he believes he's on the right side of history for refusing the COVID vaccination. And I posted that, well, if the right side of history is 1.2 million dead Americans, 300,000 or so unnecessary deaths due to refusal to be vaccinated, if that's the right side of history, then what's the wrong side? Well, someone really took issue with my statement and disputed the data and called it misinformation. Well, I have news for you. Whoever did that, this is not misinformation. This is the real information. And so down below, what I did was I searched the medical literature, screening only high quality articles from the very best, most rigorous medical journals to come up with our best estimate for exactly how many people died from COVID in the United States, how many of those deaths, who they were, exactly who died, what were the demographics of those who died, how many of those deaths were unnecessary or preventable, could have been prevented by vaccination if only those people had agreed to be vaccinated. We know that when the vaccine was rolled out, that there was very quickly, there were people on social media saying it was a bad vaccine, that they had invented the vaccine, that it was dangerous and so forth. And a lot of people refused to be vaccinated. And we know that that there were about 300 to 400,000 or so deaths in the United States from COVID that were preventable, people that would not have died had they been vaccinated. And so that's really the essence of the research that I did. And I want to put that out there to counter the notion that that is misinformation. That is not misinformation. That is those are the facts. That is exactly those are the correct numbers. The deaths from COVID in the United States, there's been nothing else in the history of the United States, not even all the wars that we've ever been in since the time of the Revolutionary War, have killed more Americans than died from COVID. We didn't lose 1.2 million Americans in combat in all the wars we have ever been in the history of the United States. The 300,000 figure, unnecessary or needless deaths due to refusal to be vaccinated, to put in perspective, our deaths in Vietnam were 55,000 or 60,000. We lost 300,000 Americans in 1 year who didn't need to die. It's 5 times greater than we lost in Vietnam. The amount of death that we sustained from COVID in this country is staggering. 1.2 million people, and it's continuing. There are still people dying every day from COVID. COVID's not gone. It is obviously much less than it was, but it is not gone. So the other thing that I had to take issue with Aaron Rodgers' statement that not being vaccinated was being on the right side of history. And there are 300,000 people who are not vaccinated who are not on the right side of history. They're not on the right side of the grass. They're on the underside of the sod. So let's not forget them. Now, who we also know from very good studies that millions of lives were saved because of the COVID vaccine. Had we not given that vaccine, we would have lost many, many more Americans. Instead of 1.2 million dead, we probably would have lost 4 or 5 million Americans would have died if it had not been for that vaccine. That vaccine saved millions of American lives. All of this is fact, proven, high quality evidence, high quality research, all in the text below. References are right there. Now, Um, the next point I want to get to is, well, for like Aaron Rodgers, is he, you know, delusional? Are people like Aaron Rodgers delusional? They believe they're just not right. North of the border, there's something that the lights don't go all the way on, and the elevator doesn't go to the top floor. Whatever expression you want to use. Is there something wrong supertentorially? Well, in some of these people, there is. There are some people who, no matter how much evidence is presented, they are fixed in their delusional belief, and no amount of actually quality evidence could change their minds because they have a fixed delusional system. That is an indication of something not right north of the border. And I think there are a fair number of people like that in the anti-vax, anti-mRNA crowd. But there's I believe there's a large percentage of people who are rational and reasonable and confused because they're hearing from people that they think are experts. They see people on TV that they are told are experts. They see people on social media who are presenting themselves as experts. They read articles and they're bombarded with content from people who are presented to the public as experts. And these quote unquote experts are presenting incorrect information, false information, misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it. There are a fair number of these people out there who are posing as experts, who are putting out incorrect information. And they have been very, very effective. I believe these people have influenced public policy. They have influenced Congress, congressional committees. They've testified in Congress. Some of them have even been appointed to various government agencies. They have access to television, cable news. They're omnipresent on cable news. And they have, of course, a very significant presence on social media, on Twitter or X and LinkedIn and Facebook and all the other social media out there. And so I think there's a lot of people out there who are reasonably intelligent and rational people who have just been presented with bad information from people they think are legitimate. And that, I think, is a major part of the anti vax problem. And I'm pretty much the only one saying this. Others are focused on how we respond to vaccine hesitancy and so forth, and that's all wise and good information. But we're not paying enough attention. People are not paying enough attention to the issue that I've been speaking about now for 5 years, and that is that the public has been largely misled. A vast portion of the public has been largely misled by a contingent of experts who, if you actually dig into their credentials, they're frauds. Their credentials are inflated, exaggerated, embellished, and in some cases, outright fabricated. And you don't know that. Why doesn't the public know that these experts they see on TV are frauds? Because the media hasn't vetted them. The media doesn't do a very good job of vetting experts. They might look at a CV and read a CV and believe what's on the CV and go with it. That's not adequate. About half of all resumes and CVs contain false information, and a lot contain fabricated information. Even among physicians, you will find CVs with false and fabricated information. And there's nobody to protect the public from doctors who fabricate information on their CVs. If they're applying for a license or applying for hospital privileges, their CV will be vetted to some extent, but there's no one who actually goes through a CV or a resume line by line and fact checks every claim. A lot of doctors have CVs that are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 pages or more. And there's a lot of information on there. What recruiter, what HR person has the time to review those CVs and those resumes line by line? Nobody. So they don't get reviewed line by line. There's only one person who does that. Hello, that's me. I review these CVs, and to the best of my ability, I go line by line, dutifully, carefully fact checking every claim. And I can tell you that among all of the experts out there that talk about messenger RNA and vaccine and anti-vaxxers, anti-mRNA, I have not found a resume yet that doesn't have serious exaggeration, embellishment, and even fabrication. So if you don't know these things, if these people aren't being vetted, then patients and the public are being fed incorrect information by fake experts. No wonder people are confused. Now, maybe Aaron Rodgers means well, and he's just confused because he's listened to some doctor who actually isn't a doctor and just pretending to be one, or some doctor who never did one day of training after graduating medical school, no internship, no residency, no fellowship. Or maybe he's listening to a doctor who has such a checkered past that he's been stripped of his board certification for doing bad things, and he doesn't know that. So my point, my biggest point is that the public is at risk for being inundated with false information from doctors who have fake credentials, embellished, exaggerated, fabricated CVs. And what has happened as a result of that? As a result of that, people refuse to be vaccinated. And that's what led to hundreds of thousands of deaths in the United States. These fake experts are not just out there, making a buck, selling some remedy or giving speeches. They're also adversely affecting public health and indirectly causing people to reject vaccination and die as a result. And who is it that died disproportionately from COVID? So it's a very interesting question. We lost 1.2 million Americans. Who were these 1.2 million? Well, the data is very good on this. We have a lot of solid data on who actually died from COVID. And here they are. Obviously, elderly people were much more likely to die of COVID. Poor people, much more likely to die of COVID. Why? Well, probably because they didn't have access to healthcare, don't have access to great information, don't have doctors, weren't advised to get vaccinated, or maybe they just believe the wrong things. But poor people suffered more. They had more deaths. Rural people in rural America, in the South, Southeast, and even into the Mountain West, had a much higher, and we're not talking about slight differences. We're talking about very significant differences in mortality. The groups that had the highest mortality had mortality 3, 4, 500% more than the lower mortality groups. So elderly, rural, poor, also people of color, Black Americans, brown skin Americans, Native Americans, folks who are already subject to healthcare disparities. These healthcare disparities showed up dramatically in these other groups. But also, and interestingly, the death toll was much, much higher based upon political orientation. It has been clearly shown repeatedly that people who lean Republican or who are Republican or conservative had a much, much higher death rate from COVID than people who lean the other way. So basically, it was Republicans who suffered the most, much more than Democrats in terms of mortality. And it was educational level. People who were more highly educated had a much lower mortality than people who were less educated, presumably because they're more able to discern the difference between false information and accurate information. Maybe a more educated person can spot a fake doctor better than someone who isn't as well educated. So this is who paid the price. And so when I bring this stuff up, this is not misinformation. This is the information. These are the facts, and the references are all below. Read them for yourself and ask yourself a question. Where do you get your information from? On COVID or mRNA vaccines or anything else medical. Where do you get your information from? Who do you trust? Who do you listen to? Whose voice are you repeating? And then ask yourself, is that person legitimate? How do you know if they're legitimate? Did you check out their CV? Did you call their references and see whether or not they actually whether they actually were a professor at a university, or maybe they made that up. So if you don't know that, then you're at risk for believing something that is not true from an expert that is a fake expert. This, to me, is the single biggest story in the COVID pandemic. There's a lot of big stories in the COVID pandemic, but to me, the biggest story is the fact that fake experts with embellished, exaggerated, and fabricated credentials have been able to dominate the public discourse and convince the country of that which is not true. And Aaron Rodgers is just one more person convinced of stuff that is not true, because either because he's delusional and just can't let it go, or because he's reasonable, rational, but he just believes the wrong stuff, but because he was conned by a con artist with an MD degree. Thank you very much. Hope you found this interesting. Read the below, please. It's really a lot of information, and it's good information.